ভারতে অবস্থানরত জনবিক্ষোভে পলাতক শেখ হাসিনা আর কখনোই বাংলাদেশে ফিরবে না। আগামী ডিসেম্বরেও না, এমনকি তার পরের ডিসেম্বরেও না। এনটিভির নর্থ আমেরিকা ব্যুরো চিফ ফরিদ আলমকে গত বুধবার দেওয়া এক সাক্ষাৎকারে এসব কথা বলেছেন মার্কিন কূটনীতিক ও আটলান্টিক কাউন্সিলের সিনিয়র ফেলো জন ডেনিলুইচ। সাক্ষাৎকারে দেখুন বিস্তারিত।
Dear viewers, today we have the former U.S. Deputy Chief of Mission to Bangladesh, currently non-resident senior fellow at Atlantic Council, Jon Danilowicz. John, thank you for joining us.
Great, it's my pleasure.
Okay, John, in light of Sheikh Hasina's recent press conference in New Delhi and her announced intention to return to Bangladesh, how do you interpret this move? Is this a genuine political calculation or primarily a narrative play for her base?
Thanks. Well, first, let's make one thing clear. Sheikh Hasina has no intention of returning to Bangladesh, not in December, not ever. There was nothing that was said at the press conference that was new. She had announced her intention to return in December earlier. We can talk about why she might have done that. Nothing that we heard from her son or any of the other speakers was new. What Hasina and her colleagues were clearly trying to do was to divert attention from the commemorations of this 2-year anniversary of her flight from Bangladesh in August of 2024. She was trying to send a message to her supporters, those who she fears are going to break away from her. She was trying to send a message to those who are providing her funding and support. And she was trying to interrupt attempts by India and Bangladesh to forge a new relationship going forward. And most of all, she didn't want people talking on August 5th about her ignominious flight from Bangladesh. She wanted to present herself as some prodigal daughter about to bravely return to Bangladesh. I believe that when December comes and goes, Sheikh Hasina will still be outside the country. And finally, hopefully at that point, people will be able to see through what she and others have been saying.
Okay. So given that Dhaka has officially requested her extradition under the bilateral treaty, why do you think she felt the need to publicly announce a planned return at this moment?
Well, again, she's trying to seize the initiative. She doesn't want the story to be about what others are planning to do. She wants to pretend that she's still the one calling the shots, when that's clearly not the case. As I mentioned before, she has no intention of returning to Bangladesh. She knows, as does everyone else, that if she were to return to Bangladesh, the only way she would do so is as part of a judicial process whereby she's sent back from India and she's escorted back to Bangladesh by Bangladeshi, law enforcement officials to face trial and to face the sentence for the case in which she's already been convicted. She's not going to return as a conquering hero. There's not going to be any deal that allows her back. She's not coming back as a tourist or as anything other than a fugitive who needs to face justice. And the same goes for the others who have sought refuge in India or elsewhere alongside her, those others who have been credibly accused or convicted of their involvement in crimes in July and August of 2024 and previously.
Sheikh Hasina's son, Shojibadeh Joy, stated in an interview with Al Jazeera that his mother was done with politics and intended to retire. What explains this shift in message? What is your comments about this?
Well, again, I don't believe anything that comes out of the mouth of Sheikh Hasina or her family members. They've already demonstrated that they'll do or say anything to cling to power. So this was clearly an attempt to distract from the main issue, which is Sheikh Hasina's culpability for the crimes committed at her behest in Bangladesh during July and August of 2024 and before. By saying that she would not be involved in politics, he was probably trying to, again, divert attention and perhaps to generate some sympathy for her. But anyone who knows Sheikh Hasina, and I certainly know her from my years in Bangladesh and my interactions with her, know that she's not about to give up power. She did nothing during her time in office to groom any successor. She didn't allow any internal democracy within her own party. And anyone who was seen as a potential threat, she sidelined. Not just in the end of her regime, but throughout her entire tenure, she systematically moved aside anyone who would not do whatever she said, and anyone who showed any independence, and anyone who might be a threat to her.
Okay, Sheikh Hasina left the country during the August uprising, yet she is now framing the situation as she is being prevented from returning. What do you make of this, and who do you think it is intended to reach?
Yeah. Well, again, let's be clear. Sheikh Hasina made the decision in August of 2024 to flee Bangladesh. She abandoned her country, she abandoned her party, she abandoned many of those of her supporters. Now, she did so because she was convinced, I think rightly, by her inner circle that if she were to have stayed, she would have been arrested and that justice would have been done. So she left to flee justice, not for any other reason. She didn't flee to, prevent further loss of life. She didn't flee for the good of the country. She fled at the time because she thought it was in her interest. Now, if she wanted to return tomorrow to Bangladesh, that would be simple enough to arrange. She could surrender, or her lawyers could surrender on her behalf to the Bangladeshi authorities, and the Bangladeshi authorities could work with the Indian authorities to arrange for her transfer back to Bangladesh. This is routine. It happens all the time. There are fugitives around the world who, for one reason or another, either voluntarily or are forced to return to their home jurisdictions to face justice. So there's nothing preventing Sheikh Hasina from returning to Bangladesh. If she wants to go, she can go tomorrow. So the idea, again, of saying that she's going to return in December is simply a way of pushing the issue down the road. And I'm certain that before December comes, she'll come up with some excuse why she can't go at that time.
Okay, the people recently talking about one issue that is nearly 2 years, Sheikh Hasina has relied largely on audio message rather than on camera appearance, including during this recent media cycle. Why do you think her team has continued to avoid direct video appearance?
Well, again, she's only able to stay in India because the Indian authorities allow her to do so. I'm not privy to whatever conditions the Indian government may have put on her asylum. It may well be that one of the conditions she agreed to was limitations on her public appearances to include video appearances. But for reasons only known to them, the Indian authorities have allowed her to communicate freely with her supporters in Bangladesh and around the world. They've allowed her to transmit audio messages in the past. And in this circumstance, they allowed her to participate virtually in the press conference, giving a statement, an audio statement, and then responding verbally to questions. I don't question the reason why the Foreign Correspondents Club agreed or wanted to hold a press conference. I don't believe that the Indian government should have prevented them from doing so. I believe journalists have an important role to play. But the Indian authorities certainly could have prevented Sheikh Hasina from participating. Either they could have reminded her of the conditions that they put on her presence in India, and if she had defied them, they could have withdrawn the support that they provide to her. Or failing that, there are technical means by which the Indians could have certainly prevented her from appearing in any fashion at the press conference. So it may not have been the Indian government's idea to hold the press conference, but certainly they could have prevented her from doing so. And they had been warned by the Bangladeshi authorities what the consequences would be if they allowed this to go forward. So in some ways, the repercussions of this are something that the Indian government and officials should have been well aware of ahead of time.
Okay, I think I got all of answer from you about her. I want to go to the different type of question. So
Sure.
how do you expect the Trump administration to view these unfolding developments in Bangladesh, and what level of direct engagement or intervention, if any, might we see from Washington?
Right. So, over the past year and now 8 months since President Trump took office, he's been very direct, and his officials have been very direct in terms of what U.S. interests are, both globally and then specifically when it comes to Bangladesh. The United States is very ably represented by Ambassador Brent Christensen in Washington. There have been a number of high-level interactions with Assistant Secretary of State Paul Kapoor and Presidential Special Envoy Ambassador Sergio Gore visiting Dhaka, among others. And the Foreign Minister, Dr. Khalil Rahman, the State Minister for Foreign Affairs, the Finance Minister, and other senior officials have been in Washington. Both sides have spoken about the opportunities to build the U.S.-Bangladesh relationship further, focusing particularly on economic and trade, and other areas of shared interest, including security in the Indo-Pacific region. In none of the public pronouncements on the U.S.-Bangladesh relationship has anyone from either the U.S. side or the Bangladesh side mentioned Sheikh Hasina or the Awami League. So I have no reason to believe that this is something which even, falls onto the bilateral agenda. The United States has had a long interest in supporting democracy and human rights in Bangladesh, but the Trump administration has indicated that it's pursuing a narrower set of interests. That's not to say that democracy and human rights aren't important to the United States, but at any time, the administration focuses on what it sees as its priorities. And as I mentioned, there's been no indication from Washington, from anyone in the Trump administration, that they care at all about Sheikh Hasina. So if Sheikh Hasina somehow believes that the United States is going to do her bidding, then I think once again she's delusional.
Okay, already you said about the recent visit of Sergio Gore. Still, I want to ask one question to you. The U.S. Special Envoy Sergio Gore recently concluded a visit to Dhaka amid rumors regarding Americans' strategic interests in the Bay of Bengal and St. Martin's Island. Based on your diplomatic experience, is there any substance to claims of a U.S. push for a military or a strategic footprint in the the region of these rumors?
So I've been associated with Bangladesh now for just over 36 years, since I first arrived in Dhaka as a junior diplomat in August of 1990. There have been two things that have been constant over these 36 years. One is the warmth and hospitality of the Bangladeshi people. The second is the propensity of some to believe in conspiracy theories. It's very common now, and it has been very common to hear conspiracy theories about the role of the United States or other external actors. Over the past 2+ years in particular, we've heard a lot of conspiracy theories, primarily propagated by former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and her supporters, about alleged U.S. interests or an alleged U.S. role, whether it be in Bangladesh or South Asia. I hesitate to dignify any of these, but one in particular I want to mention, this canard about U.S. interest in St. Martin Island, that somehow the United States wants to establish a naval base in the Bay of Bengal at St. Martin Island. Now, I've never had the pleasure of visiting St. Martin Island, but I've talked to many who have, and I've seen photographs and I've seen maps indicating, its location and things about the island. Anyone who thinks that there's anything about St. Martin Island that would make it appropriate for a military base, again, is delusional. The U.S. wants a strong relationship with Bangladesh. There's certainly a security component to this. There's certainly a desire to partner with Bangladesh in providing security in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond. But to connect that to any of the reasons why Sheikh Hasina left office, again, it's delusional and it's meant to distract attention from the real issues. As somebody said right after Sheikh Hasina's fall in August of 2024, that boat sank itself.
Okay, John, thank you. So I want to ask a different type of question is about Bangladeshi politics. The turning to the situation on the ground, how would you evaluate the BNP government's performance and overall stability so far?
Yeah, so first, before answering that, I want to take a step back to where we were, or where Bangladesh was just over 2 years ago. And I want to give full credit to Professor Muhammad Yunus and the interim government for the steps that they took, both immediately after assuming office, but over the ensuing 18 months, to restore stability, to begin to address issues related to accountability, to begin a process leading towards meaningful reforms to the Bangladeshi state, and then most importantly, to hold free and fair elections and hand power to an elected government. They completed those tasks in large part, and in February this year, we saw elections which brought Prime Minister Tariq Rahman and his party to power with a clear majority, a clear mandate. It's still relatively early. It's just 6 months since the government took office. They certainly have faced challenges, including challenges not of their own making as a result of the U.S. war in Iran. But overall, I think I would give the government pretty good marks for how it has acquitted itself during this time, particularly considering it had been 2 decades since the BNP had been in power. And you don't have to take my word for it. Just in recent days, the International Republican Institute published a public opinion poll, which was conducted in recent weeks, which showed that the majority of the Bangladeshi people are happy with how the BNP government is performing. The situation's not perfect, but the support that the BNP enjoyed in February has largely maintained itself. The survey indicates the areas that you would expect where people would like to see more done in terms of fighting corruption, improving the economy, and again, pursuing a broad reform effort. But overall, I think the people of Bangladesh, and I am certainly willing to give Prime Minister Tariq Rahman and his team the benefit of the doubt. They have a 5-year mandate. They're 6 months in. Now they have 4.5 years to create a record that they can run on in the next elections. And that's what democracy is all about.
Okay, so almost a similar question. So you know about the Tariq Rahman is the Prime Minister of Bangladesh. His father was the army chief. He was the president. His mother was the 3 times Prime Minister in Bangladesh. So how do you think that political legacy will influence the way he governs and approaches leadership?
So I never met President Zia Rahman, although I met a number of U.S. and Bangladeshi officials who knew him very closely and spoke to me about him. I did have the privilege and the honor of knowing Begum Khalida Zia, meeting with her on a number of occasions, both in larger settings and smaller ones. And I have a great deal of respect for her and mourned her passing. I've never met Tariq Rahman. In fact, of all of the major political players in Bangladesh, he's the one individual I've never met. I returned to Bangladesh in August of 2007. By that time, he was already in prison after the 111 change in government. He left Bangladesh for the United Kingdom while I was in Bangladesh, but I never had any contact with him during his time in the United Kingdom, and certainly not since he's returned to Bangladesh. So everything I know about him, I know secondhand. Again, I give him high marks for what he's done and said, both since taking office, but also during the campaign period. I was on record having argued that, in my view, it would have been preferable for him to have returned to Bangladesh earlier than he did, so that the country could get a chance to know him better and he could get a chance to know the country better and what had changed in the years that he had been gone. But I think you can see signs already that during his time in the United Kingdom, he was closely observing the situation in Bangladesh. Obviously, he maintained close contact with an inner circle of advisors and people within his party. But I think he also was a keen observer of what was happening in the United Kingdom. And I think he's been able to try to apply some of the lessons he learned during his time in London and Bangladesh, and we'll see how that goes. The final thing I would say is that I have had the opportunity to meet, briefly albeit, with both his wife and daughter, and both of them seem like very accomplished women who are clearly a positive influence on him. So I think overall, I give him high marks for what he's done so far. I have great hopes for the future, but I'm also cognizant of the internal and external challenges he faces. Being Prime Minister of Bangladesh is not an easy job. Being head of any state is not an easy job.
Okay, John, this is my last question. So, the Prime Minister Tariq Rahman will be facing world leaders for the first time at the 81st United Nations General Assembly. What do you think he needs to accomplish on that stage, and what message should Bangladesh prioritize? in
Right.
presenting itself to the international community.
Right. Well, as they say, you only get one chance to make a first impression. And for Prime Minister Tariq Rahman, this will be his first opportunity to make a first impression on many world leaders. If you contrast the situation when the Prime Minister arrives in New York in September with the situation faced by his predecessor, Professor Mohammed Yunus, Professor Yunus could draw on a very broad network of senior world leaders who he's known for many years. And I think Professor Yunus was able to use that both to his benefit as chief advisor, but clearly and more importantly to Bangladesh's benefit. Prime Minister Tariq Rahman doesn't have that advantage. During his time in London, while he maintained contact with his party, he had limited contact with other world leaders. He's had some limited contact since he was sworn in as prime minister, and obviously he had some limited contact, at the time of his return to Bangladesh and around his mother's funeral as well. But he hasn't spent significant time directly engaging with world leaders. So it is going to be important, his time in New York. An advantage that he has is first, a very capable foreign minister, Dr. Khalilur Rahman, who does have that wide experience. And I'm sure that's part of the reason why Dr. Khalil was chosen as foreign minister. The fact that Bangladesh and Dr. Khalil will have the presidency of the General Assembly, I think will be helpful to Prime Minister Tariq Rahman. I wouldn't expect too much in terms of what will be accomplished in terms of, concrete agreements or any concrete achievements of the time in New York. It's not really the forum for that. There are so many world leaders, they're interacting with many people, but it is a chance for him to make that initial contact. So certainly he'll have the opportunity to interact with President Trump, although I don't believe they'll have a bilateral meeting. He'll have the opportunity, I'm sure, to meet with some senior U.S. official. And likewise, he'll have the opportunity to engage with senior officials from other countries and international organizations in New York. I would anticipate that he'll have time to interact with his counterparts from the South Asian region, perhaps Prime Minister Modi, perhaps Prime Minister Sharif, and other regional leaders. And since one of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party's longstanding priorities has been to revitalize the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, SARC, I would think that one of the objectives that Bangladesh will have in New York will be to reiterate its desire to see SARC function, which is important for Bangladesh and the region, which is one of the least interconnected in the world.
Thank you, John. Thanks for you joining us today, and hope have you back soon again. So thank you.
It was my pleasure.